Um, all right, where are we? All right, it's the 15th of November, Sunday school. We'll do that at the end. Glad you're all here. Okay, so this is going to be the end of the quarter that we're in now, the Proverbs and Song of Songs. We're on session 13. If you have or want to look in the follow on the quarterly, it's page 118. And this is the second and last of the two lessons on Song of Songs. Last week we talked about, what Song of Songs is, remember, is it's a specific relationship between King Solomon, and last week's lesson was talking about this girl that he was in love with. In this week's lesson, it's the last half of the book. The context is chapters 5 through 8, and they're married now. And so it just kind of talks about the marriage relationship, which we're going to, we'll look at the study guide about what it talks about, the marriage relationship, and then how that relates to, in the Bible, it talks about how the marriage relationship between a man and a woman is analogous to the relationship between believers and God and Christ, that marriage relationship where the church is the bride of Christ. We, the church, we, the people, are the bride of Christ. And then it talks about how the context of the relationship between us and Christ, he's the groom, we're the bride, relates to the marriage relationship of literally the man and the woman that are involved in the marriage relationship. Okay, so the verses today, it's chapter 5 of Song of Songs or Song of Solomon, verses 6 through 16. So I'm just going to read through the verses. And what you'll see here, this again is from the perspective of the woman in the relationship, who's the wife at this point. You can see at the beginning of chapter 5 here, she's talking about, she comes to her garden, gather her myrrh with her spices, sleeping, but my heart was awake, and my love was knocking. And I'm just kind of, quickly sort of paraphrasing this as we go through. So this kind of, again, is about her love for him. And I was kind of joking a few minutes ago about what Cheryl was saying, but really we'll see in today's lesson and through the study guide, it talks about how it's important to have that, not admiration per se, maybe there's a better word in the study guide, of that relationship that hopefully you have in the marriage. And if you don't, how that can affect a marriage. Okay. So let's just read chapter 5, verses 6 through 16. So again, this is from the perspective of the woman, and it says, and remember the characters in this book, we learned last week, of course, Solomon, this lady who was his girlfriend, now his bride. There were men, there were ladies like the girl's friends or her peers, and it seems like there was one more, 4 other voices. So Solomon, the woman, the young women, the narrator, and the brothers. So, other men. So today, again, is from the perspective of the woman. She's talking about her husband, and she talks to the young women, which you'll see here shortly. So let's look at verses 6 through 16. It says, I opened to my love, but my love had turned and gone away. My heart sank because he had left. I sought him, but did not find him. I called him, but he did not answer. The guards who go about the city found me. They beat and wounded me. They took my cloak from me, the guardians of the walls. Young women of Jerusalem, I charge you, if you find my love, tell him that I am lovesick. What makes the one you love better than another, most beautiful of women? What makes him better than another, that you would give us this charge? My love is fit and strong, notable among 10,000. His head is purest gold, his hair is wavy and black as a raven. His eyes are like doves beside flowing streams, washed in milk and set like jewels. His cheeks are like beds of spice, mounds of perfume. His lips are lilies, dripping with flowing myrrh. His arms are rods of gold set with beryl. His body is an ivory panel covered with lapis lazuli. His legs are alabaster pillars set on pedestals of pure gold. His presence is like Lebanon, as majestic as the cedars. His mouth is sweetness. He is absolutely desirable. This is my love, and this is my friend, young women of Jerusalem. So you can see, again, the woman starts out talking, and then she tells the women of Jerusalem, if you see him, tell him I'm lovesick, I miss him. And then the women say, why do you feel like this about your man? And then she explains at the end. So the characters in this, again, are the lady and then the young women that are around her. Okay. The other thing is, it talks about, and we'll get to it in a minute in the study guide, that this uh, could be this. This may not be literal, especially when you look in verse 7 when it talks about the guards about the city beat and wounded her and took her cloak. Because it says in the study guide, of course, if she was the wife of Solomon, the king, it's not very likely that she would be beaten. So this may be a dream or symbolic, but we'll come to that here in just a couple of minutes. All right. So I'm just going to go through kind of the context on page 119 to sort of look at the overall picture in this. And it says, so it starts out again, chapters 5 through 8, which are the last four books, the last half of Song of Songs, bring to mind God's directive about marriage. And God's very clear in the Bible about marriage. Back to Genesis, Adam and Eve, he created the man. The man needed a helpmeet or a companion. And so from the man, from his rib, God created the woman. Okay. And by that, by putting them together, that is what the institution of marriage is, as defined in the Bible. Okay. So it says God's directive about marriage, in which he declared that the two, husband and wife, would become one, Genesis 2:24, and a couple other places in the Bible it talked about how the man and the woman cleave together from their families and become one. It says the man and woman in the poem got married, and now they're learning how to live as one as they grow in their relationship. Early on in their marriage, they demonstrated the value of investing in each other instead of giving up on one another when they faced conflict that resulted from a misunderstanding. They resolved their conflict and affirmed each other. Okay, so before we get into the lesson from the actual verses again, just a little bit of my thoughts on that paragraph where it talks about the man and the woman got married. They're learning to live as one as they grow in their relationship. Early on in their marriage, they demonstrated the value of investing in each other instead of giving up on one another when they faced conflicts that resulted from misunderstanding. So this year, in last June, was our 35th wedding anniversary. So we dated for 5 years before that. So we've been together for a long time. So one of the things that, as I look back on that I think has been helpful for us, and every person's circumstance is unique, but so we graduated together from high school. She went straight to college at Appalachian State. I had to go to a year of prep school before I went to the Air Force Academy. So I was a year behind her graduating from college. Okay. She graduated in 84. I graduated in 85. But we had dated through, starting after when we graduated from high school, we dated through college. And so we got married right after I graduated from college in 1985. Now, because of our circumstances, I graduated from the Air Force Academy, so I was in the Air Force. So a lot of people, when they get married, because of maybe they met their spouse locally, let's just use here for an example. I grew up, I lived literally just a stone's throw from where Brian and Michelle lived there on Rugby Forest Lane. Okay, Cheryl grew up the last, from sixth grade on when her dad retired from the Air Force and moved back here on Country Road. So we went to Mills River for 1 year together when she came in sixth grade. We were in rugby together. We were graduated from West together. So we sort of knew each other really more during high school. And that happens a lot because the people that you're around, that may be the pool of people that you see the most, and perhaps find someone that you want to date and potentially marry. A lot of people, when they get married, they stay in the local area. Maybe they find a job. They graduated from college and came back here because it's where their family is. And that can be a good thing. It can be a potentially, it can be a thing that causes potential conflict. And I say that because if you stay where you grew up, you've got your, for guys, you've got the group of friends that you grew up with, went to school with, same thing with the girls. And once you get married, or even when you're dating, there is that perhaps a pull by those friends of, hey, we miss you. You need to come hang out with us. What happened? We used to be pretty tight. And now you're spending all your time with Cheryl. Okay, you need to come hang out with us. And that's natural. Certainly once you're married, the same thing can happen, right? Well, in our circumstance, because we were in the Air Force and now we go to Mississippi for a year for pilot training. Then we went to Myrtle Beach. We were there for 3 years. Then we went to England for a year and a half. And then we were in New Mexico for 3 years. And then we were in Las Vegas for 4 years, Connecticut for 2 years, came back here for about a year, Alaska for 4 years, Germany for 2 years, Georgia for 2 years, and then moved back here when I retired. Okay. So, especially at the beginning, when we first got married, we were, because of the circumstance, we were taken away from here, from our families, from our old friends. We still, kind of could contact them. There was no Facebook or anything like that. But what it really, the circumstance it put us in was we were on our own. Now, we still had our parents. I mean, I borrowed money if I ever needed it. One time, I think, from my dad. We borrowed money from her dad one time. They were very gracious and generous. We paid them back. But they were always there for us if we needed them. But the point is that because we were literally on our own, and so we started with having to lean on each other. And so that kind of goes to the lesson how it's going to be today. And what I just mentioned in that paragraph, early on in their marriage, they demonstrated the value of investing in each other instead of giving up on one another when they faced conflict that resulted from misunderstanding. So because we were kind of by our circumstances, taken away from what was normal, natural, our family, our friends, we had to kind of rely on each other. Now, we made friends in the Air Force that when we would move from one place to the other, sometimes, we would leave and there'd be a new group. And then we'd move to another place and maybe somebody that we were with at the first assignment had gone somewhere and we'd come back together. So many times in my career, we would come back together with old friends that we had before. But ultimately, we had each other the whole time. Okay. And it's very important to have that foundation be built. Because that's what when the times get tough, that's what you kind of fall back on. Okay, and there were competing interests, and there were arguments, and that's natural too. Not everybody's going to see perfectly eye to eye, but what happens hopefully is, I'm trying to think of where it's going to be. I guess it's later in the lesson of the things that you fall back on when you have a disagreement or whatever it is that reminds you of why you're together. Okay, now, so. I said all that to say, I think that's it helped us a lot. That's not saying that once you find your mate, your spouse, male, female, for the guys and the girls, that if you decide to marry them, you have to move away or your marriage is going to fail. I'm not saying that at all because that's not the case. Okay? There are successful marriages, and I knew a lot of people in the Air Force that got divorced. They'd been just like us together, kind of leaning on each other, and just over time, things happen. Okay, so there is no guaranteed cure-all of the thing that keeps people together. Although I'd say if you start in a Christian relationship with a Christian partner, that's going to give you a lot to fall back on. Certainly, because we know what the Bible says about marriage and relationships. And if you try to live that and remind each other of that, and when you have that argument or when someone gets hurt, having that foundation can help you to repair that relationship and carry on. Okay, and so hopefully you have that to fall back on. So I'd say if any one thing, that would be it. I would recommend starting out in a equally yoked relationship as it relates to Christian and going from there. Okay, now, so to go back into the lesson now, it says the man put his wife on it. This is kind of the story of Song of Solomon. The man put his wife on a chariot one day and rode through the city with her so everyone could see her beauty. He was very proud of his wife. So he wanted to be out and let people see her, to see the relationship, to see how they loved each other, how they treated each other. And then it says later on in that paragraph, earlier she expressed her certainty that the two of them belonged to each other. See Proverbs 2:16. They were completely committed to each other, and their mutual commitment allowed them to give themselves to each other without any reservation at all. And so that's that commitment that's when we cleave from our parents, that's our family growing up. When you find that spouse, that mate, you cleave from them. They're still your family. You still love them. They still love you. But now you're devoted. Your primary, I look at it as your number one priority is God. To me, the number two priority is family, beginning with spouse, and then your immediate family, children, parents, brothers, sisters, extended family, and then to me it goes country after that, and then everything else after that, friends, enemies, whatever. They're all, but you have to have that priority of God first, me then family. All right. So by building that commitment early, that will help you as time goes by. At the bottom of page 119 in the study guide, it says, toward the end of the poem, the man and the woman appeared together again on his chariot. She leaned on him as they made their way into the city. She talked with him about her desire for him to keep her in his heart. Then she described the resilience of their love. Like death, nothing could stop it. Meaning, death is going to come for everybody unless we're raptured. Okay, nothing, no one can avoid death unless we're raptured. So, but she was trying to, our love is that strong. Nothing can stop it. Okay. Now, I'm going to hit this just because, again, it talks about in Song of Songs about the intimacy of marriage. And when you're talking about that, that's talking about the sexual relationship. But it says on page 120, it says, some readers of Song of Songs might ask why Solomon was so expressive about God's gift of sexual intimacy. And I'm not saying that this is a graphic depiction. It's because Solomon talks about that love and that marriage relationship. But it says the answer to the question here, it says Solomon wanted to reclaim the truth about sex. Sexual expression and intimacy between a husband and a wife is a gift from God, rather than something to be discarded as a creation of a sinful world. Solomon wanted God's people to know that sexual intimacy was God's gift to humanity from the very beginning of time. And from way back then, even to this day, people, and again, if you take it from a Christian perspective, there's a purpose of sex. It's to be intimate, with your spouse. That is kind of the ultimate level of the love that you have for each other. For non-Christians, in a perverse world, sex can be turned into it can get very perverse. Okay, and that's been, it's not a new phenomenon. That's been forever. The church at I'm trying to think if the church at Ephesus, in some of Paul's letters, he kind of reminds the churches of how they're supposed to be pure as Christians. Because people over the course of time, would take sex and turn it into all kinds of things that were not biblical, put it that way. All right. And then, so to finish that thought, it says God's people also needed to know that the ultimate goal of sexual intimacy is not the sexual expression itself. The ultimate goal is to build a true and lasting relationship that brings glory to God and leads to family and human flourishing. I mean, ultimately, sex results in procreation, right? That's how we have kids. And that's how we repopulate the planet, okay? Now, it says, when the gift of sexual intimacy, and this is ultimately how we need to protect ourselves, protect our thoughts, to save ourselves for that marriage relationship. When the gift of sexual intimacy is properly enjoyed and protected, everyone benefits. Husbands and wives benefit as their relationship with each other deepens. Children benefit as their moms and dads are secure, happy, and fulfilled in their marriage. The church and society benefit from homes that are stable. God desires for us to invest in building strong marriage relationships. So you can see, that's a completely different take than the world would have about how, again, sexual intimacy, when you look above just that act of how what it does to honor God, okay, and within a family. And ultimately, the church and society benefit from homes that are stable. That's kind of quite a leap, right, to get to that point. Now, so that was the introduction. I'm going to go through the lesson here again, just to kind of to go back to where we were at the beginning with how you love each other and express praise or devotion or admiration for each other, and why that's important. All right. So for the verses now, 6 through 8. That's the first part of it. It says, I opened to my love, but my love had turned and gone away. My heart sank because he had left. I sought him, but did not find him. I called him, but he did not answer. So she either in the dream or, in an experience, she turns, where's my husband? Well, he's not here. Oh, I miss him. Okay. Hopefully that's, it doesn't necessarily be, oh my goodness, my husband's at work today. I'm just going to sit around and be depressed all day because he's literally gone from me for 6 hours or 8 hours. That's not what they're talking about, right? It's that having that relationship, that love for each other, that when you're separated, you want to be back together. Okay, and that's what she's expressing here. She sought him, didn't find him. She called him, but she didn't answer, and that's affecting her. Okay? Now, uh, so it says, let's see, on page 121, this verse describes the longing of a woman for the partnership and companionship of her husband. Because again, marriage, a dating relationship, marriage relationship is so much more than, just that sexual intimacy. It's a lifetime relationship, hopefully. And you want to be with that person. You got together for a reason. Hopefully you like them, you love them, you want to be with them, always. So it describes the longing of a woman for the partnership and companionship of her husband. He didn't answer when she called him. It says how tragic it is when a husband neglects the call to meet the needs of his wife. How equally sad it is when the wife fails to meet the needs of her husband. So it's a mutually beneficial relationship. It's important, right? That both take part in that. All right, verse 7. What happened, it says, when the new bride could not find her husband? The overall theme, it says, unmet needs and desires in a marriage can end in tragedy. Now, this one talks about literally a tragedy, but certainly if there is a neglect, a feeling of neglect, it can end in tragedy with respect to the marriage relationship, right? But it says the bride seeking her husband was met with abuse. And here's where it talks about, it's probably not likely that Solomon's wife would be beaten up by guards. When they said they took my cloak, they beat and wounded me, they took my cloak, the guardians of the walls. Because you can imagine what the penalty for that would be if the king found out someone had harassed or abused his wife. But let's see, it says in the description that she's giving in verse 7 strongly gives the impression that she was dreaming. In reality, she married Solomon, the king of Israel. For that reason, she likely would not have been mistreated. But what this is saying is, the way I look at that, is if my wife feels like if I'm not available, not around, neglected her, then she's vulnerable to being, if I'm certainly not there physically to protect her, then she's vulnerable. There are predators in this world, of all sorts, take advantage of you financially, take advantage of you physically. If they disagree with you, we're in a day and time now when people disagree, and it comes to the point to where they fight over it. I mean, literally in the streets they fight. Politics is kind of the thing that's the hallmark right now of we're so divided that it causes people to literally hit each other, beat each other up. It's ugly, and that's tragic. But so again, to go back to the marriage relationship, if a wife or a husband even feels like they're being neglected, it just opens the door for tragedy. Bad things could possibly happen. Okay, verse 8. So now here's where she asked the young women of Jerusalem, I charge you, if you find my love, tell him I'm lovesick. If you see my man, my husband, please let him know. So she's kind of putting out the all points bulletin. If you see him, please let him know I miss him, want him back. All right. So it says on page 122, 6 times in this chapter, the woman referred to her husband as her love. He was the centerpiece of her life, and nothing or nobody could compare to him. She had given herself completely to him, and her deep affection for him would not disintegrate. She was lovesick, and she would only be cured by the return of her husband. Now, that's the epitome of what you hope to have in your relationship. Of course, at the beginning, it's new being with each other. There's an infatuation, a love. There's just getting to know each other, hopefully growing together, leaning on each other, reconciling from the arguments or the things that happen. So it's and that's what builds that relationship, right? To ultimately where you're just so used to having that person around. That's why there have been cases, and there are many cases, people that have been together for a long time, people married 50, 60 years, that now they're old. Because if you're getting married, let's just say around in your early 20s, so you've been married for 60 years, that means you're in your 80s, right? Which, depending on how you've taken care of yourself, how healthy you are, that's part of it. But if one of the spouses passes away for whatever reason, just old age, disease, in a lot of cases, the surviving spouse dies not long after that because they feel such a loss that, literally part of them is missing, and it just, they deteriorate, right? And that's hopefully the relationship you end up with is that not that, when your spouse dies, you immediately die to follow them, but that level of, wow, that they're that much of a part of you. Okay. That's ultimately what you hope for in that relationship. Okay. So now it says the lonely cry of the woman, where she's asking these girls, please let them know I'm missing if you see them. The lonely cry of the woman sheds light on the need for married couples to work at their relationship by being present for each other. Marriages get into trouble when spouses are distant emotionally, even though they're present physically. Emotional distance stunts the growth of the marital relationship. However, being intentional about being there for each other makes a marriage stronger. To use a Solomon-like metaphor, it says the garden of marriage must be tended every day. So here's another part of this, and that is, you start that relationship all new and on your own, like we were, and you learn to grow and love and lean on each other, because you've always got that no matter where you move. Even when you move back and live, in our case, we lived next door to my mom and dad. We lived 11 minutes away from her dad, so they were always right there. But our main relationship is ourselves, right? And sometimes we would even get to the point of, okay, we just want to be by ourselves, you know. Even though we love our family, there are just times when you go, okay, I got it. We love each other. This is my best friend. She's the one that I want to be with. I don't care to be with anybody else. I don't need to be with anybody else, I should say. So that's hopefully what you end up with. But that also can possibly lead to, because you're so used to being with each other, now when you start saying, okay, I've got my thing that I've got to do today. I've got to go work out in the yard, dig the ditch, mow the grass, do this thing. She's either got your wife or your husband may have a job. They may have their poker night, their buddies, and again, I would recommend not do it, but be careful with things like that. When you start scheduling activities that take you apart, that it's okay, because you don't have to be attached to each other like Siamese twins 24/7, 365 days of the year. When you're apart, hopefully there's that desire to get back together. But you have to be careful with how you, what activities you allow to occupy that time, because you can now start to take your spouse for granted if you're not careful. All right? I'm just so used to Cheryl being there. I know every day that I'm going to get fed. I'm going to get fed, too well sometimes, right? I know that she's just there. She's always been there. It's not just a function of living in the same house. That's how it's not supposed to be, I should say. And that's a potential danger of getting to where you take each other for granted. So you have to kind of be aware of that. If you start to see that, there's been times when she's, reminded me, hey, I'm up right here. Okay. So just caution there. All right. And that's what it's saying. Emotional distance. So marriages get into trouble when spouses are distant emotionally, even though they're present physically. So you just have to guard against that, of taking the other for granted, just because they're always there. All right. Now, let's see. In verse 9, it says, the young woman's response to the bride challenged her to remember why she was attracted to her husband in the first place. Okay, so again, verse 9, here's what the ladies replied to her. What makes the one you love better than another, most beautiful of women? So they're acknowledging that she's a beautiful girl there, and that's how you know that it's gone from the main lady to the other ladies. What makes the one you love better than another, most beautiful of women? What makes him better than another that you would give us this charge? Why is he different? Why is it that you so want us to find him and remind him and to get him home to you? All right. And this is. Without having recognized, realized this from the Bible, the thing that I've had family, I've had friends who start to have difficulty in their marriage to the point of separating and even ultimately divorcing. Okay, we've all been around that. I think we've all experienced, including myself. Okay, and here's the thing now, and again, it's just something that a lot of it's because if you immerse yourself in the church, Sunday school, worship service, read the Bible, the answers are in the Bible. And by reading it, you kind of go, oh, okay, maybe this is, and hopefully counselors, pastors, Christian counselors will remind people of this. But here's where I'm going with that. And it says on page 123, after the lady said, why is it that what is it about him that makes him so special? There's a paragraph here that says relational amnesia can impact a marriage. The numerous reasons a wife or husband had for entering into a marriage covenant can be forgotten over time. We are now 40 years older than when we started dating, 35 years older than when we got married. Okay. Back then we were really cute, right? I mean, she was just the sweetest, cutest thing on the planet, and so was I, right? And over time, way down deep under the crust, there's still a sweet, cute, friendly person, right, in me. But over time, things change. You're worried about, first it's you love each other, and you just want to look at each other's eyes and be together and go to the movies and date and all that, get married. Well, then you got to work, you got to support yourself. Then you have a kid or two, sons, daughters, and now you both partner in taking care of them. But admittedly, in our family, she was the one because I was, I got to go to work. Somebody's got to provide. She did work once the kids got old enough to get into daycare and then permanently in school. I was the primary provider. Plus, being in the Air Force, I could be gone at the drop of a hat. And I was gone a fair amount. We would go away for 3 months, sometimes 4 months. Luckily having that foundation early, that helped us when we were separated. And it also taught her that she could take care of the house and the kids and the cars and the problems that came up because I literally wasn't there. And we also were blessed with that Air Force family that's pretty close, good friends that, if we're in Alaska and it snows and I'm in Afghanistan, one of our neighbors would shovel the driveway, right? You take care of each other. Hopefully you have that no matter where you live. But anyway, to go back to this, the numerous reasons a wife or a husband had for entering into a marriage covenant can be forgotten over time. So why we fell in love, why we decided to get married, over time, when she doesn't do this. For me, if I leave, if I take my clothes off at the end of the day, leave my dirty socks and my shirt and stuff on the bathroom floor, she's never complained because I'm generally pretty good about picking it up the next morning. But there are things I leave stuff laying around, and it just over time you go, how many times do I have to ask you to clean up after yourself? As an example, these things can tend to all right. When things start to get tense, if you can go back to remember what it was, why you got together at the beginning, hopefully that spark is still there and you go, oh yeah, because I loved her. Yeah, she was sweet. She still is. And that protects your relationship. Obviously that is not enough for some people, okay, because people do split. But it says, unless there is a diligence to remember and guard all the reasons that led a person into a marriage in the first place, the possibilities of the demise of that relationship only increase. By choosing to continually retell their story, a husband and wife can continue to build a successful and long-term marriage. Love must not be assumed, but continually developed and expressed. Remembering why you got into a relationship in the first place can actually help keep you in that relationship. And again, that can kind of manifest where, hey, I love you. I love you too. If it's not felt that it's meant, then now you can start going, well, what have I done wrong that my spouse doesn't love me anymore? Okay. So again, this is hopefully putting in your brain for later down the road. And when you find that perfect person, and hopefully when you meet with your pastor, whether it's Richard Merck or whoever your pastor is at the time, they give you counseling that kind of explains, okay, let's talk about why you're getting together, what, in your marriage and things to remember and think about as you go through this marriage. I remember some counseling we had from our pastor here before we got married. It was 100% true. And I've thought about it many times over the years to remind us of things that, that would potentially generate stress between us, sex, family, money. And it was just it was just a very, I'll say, sort of clinical. These are just historical things that cause problems between couples as they age in their relationship together. So if you know that going into it, they can help you. So hopefully your pastor can give you good counseling. So finally, Let's just finish this up with it says, the bride recounted the admirable characteristics of her husband. In so doing, she is seen as reaffirming her love for him. Love between a husband and wife will take the form of encouragement. And it says three themes of encouragement emerge in this section of verses. First, the bride complimented her husband's physical attributes. And it says the compliments of the bride are effusive. And you see that starting in verse 10 through 13, 14. He's fit and strong. I mean, this just could have been written for what she says about me just on a daily basis, right? Anybody still awake? When you look about this, I mean, so literally, this young lady who's married to Solomon, this is what she sees in him. He's fit and strong, notable. His head is pure as gold. His hair is wavy. Oh, he's just dreamy. He's got dreamy, raven black hair. His eyes are like doves. So anyway, she's obviously physically attracted to him, right? First, the bride complimented her husband's physical attributes. That's not necessarily everything that it is. Hopefully, you see what's inside the person, that helps you determine that they're worthy of my affection, my love, my lifelong commitment to them. It can't just be, wow, that person is just, wow, they're just gorgeous, and that's all you need. Because a lot of times, first of all, over time, your body's going to change. You're going to age, and if it's just a physical attraction, then that likely won't last. Okay, so there has to be more. Second, it says the bride identified her husband as my friend. And that's one of the things I've told people. I've had people ask me, your 30th anniversary, your 32nd, your 35th. Wow, you've been married a long time. How do you do that? And I kind of tell them, I say, well, because not only do I love my wife, but I like my wife. She's my friend, right? She's my best friend. So that's important because when you have that, invariably you're going to have a clash or a conflict, and you may stomp off to your separate corners. Hopefully, that foundation that was built is what allows you to come back and say, "I'm sorry. I wish I hadn't have said that." Okay, because she's my friend, and I tell people that. And I mentioned a minute ago, I don't need to have anybody else around me. But her. I love having her around. Even if it's, we're sitting on the couch and I'm looking at the news and she's playing a game on her phone, or we're listening to music, whatever it is, being physically present with each other, that's an important thing. Okay. That's not all. There needs to be more than that. But, I can be happy just sitting around with her, waiting for her to fix me some food. I don't wait for that very often. Anyway. Okay. Finally, first of all, it says viewing our husbands or our wives as our best friends is essential. So when I read this lesson, it just affirmed to me, that's a good thing. And, again, having not studied Song of Solomon when I was a kid or throughout our marriage, to go, wow, we just happened to get it right. I think God has had a lot to do with our success in our marriage and helped us get over, when we've had our conflicts. Finally, it says, third, the bride's effusive support of her husband and her desire for a true partnership with him speaks of an emotional and spiritual depth that is crucial in a successful marriage. So first, it was, she was effusive in her praise of his, he's just a good-looking guy, he's dreamy. I just love him, right? Second, we're best friends. Third, it's deeper than that. Okay, there's a emotional and spiritual depth that you build over time. Okay, a successful marriage encompasses intimacy, fidelity, and emotional connection, it says. And in Ephesians, it says, Paul explained that husbands are to love and lead their spouses as Christ loves and leads his church. Wives are to follow and love their husbands in fulfilling the image of what it means to be in Jesus Christ. Intentionally celebrating each other in marriage is critical to a successful marriage. Neglected marriages are rarely successful marriages. So something like this, even in this lesson, it reminds me, because I'm guilty of, again, sometimes I take her for granted. Just to, wow, you sure look good today. Thanks for dinner. It was delicious. Just a compliment to acknowledge each other. Okay, it's important. One-dimensional relationships, it says, seldom survive. If a relationship is based on the physical and sexual alone, which again, at the beginning of a relationship, that's going to be a big part of it. But it says if a marriage is just about friendship, it says if it's just based on physical and sexual, then the emotional support needed for a marriage may be absent. If a marriage is just about friendship to the neglect of sexual intimacy, a marriage may be passionless. Successful marriages are multidimensional, emotional, mental, and physical. And I'll just end by saying that when you get together and you're young and you're exploring each other, the relationship, you're learning about each other emotionally, physically, over time, things change just because of, again, priorities. You've got kids, you got a job, you got a mortgage, you got things to worry about. Your priorities change. Your relationship will change as it matures. But it's important, as it says, to keep that, as best you can to balance that relationship. Questions, comments? Okay. I'm going to close this in prayer, and then we'll get on with the rest of the day. All right, let's pray. Lord, thank you again for this day, for this lesson that we bring that you bring to us through your word, through this study guide. And I just pray that it will help first in my relationship, Lord, with my marriage to remind me, Lord, of how important it is for me to support my wife and vice versa. Just to remind us daily, Lord, why we fell in love and just to help us when we need to think back to that we can uplift each other between ourselves and in front of others as well. I pray that you'll be with the families of each one that is here and throughout our church congregation, that you would help to heal any wounds, to heal any relationship problems within our church, and to let people see that they can see your work in families in our church, God. And I know that you have a will in every family, and I just pray that you would work that will and help people to see that in action. And I ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Thank you for your attention. All right, Tyler.